Imagine you've been put in charge of designing the innovative next generation digital camera for the famous Querps camera company. What do? How do you get started? Well, very possibly you might do a brainstorm. You might bring your team together and put a problem statement across a whiteboard or a chalkboard. In what ways might we improve our digital camera for the next generation? And then you invite the team to shout out ideas. All ideas are welcome. We do not criticize ideas, because if you criticize ideas, you might squelch creativity, hurt people's feelings, and people might even die. And that would really spoil a brainstorm, wouldn't it? So you invite the team to shout out ideas. All ideas are welcome. The object is not to have creative ideas, but just to have lots and lots and lots of ideas. At the end of the brainstorm, you kind of combine ideas and vote and choose the best idea and run with it. Now, how many of you have participated in a brainstorm along these lines? Put up your hand if you have. Yeah, a lot of you. That's not surprising. It's a very standardized form of creative thinking. Now, how many of you have participated in a brainstorm like that, in which a truly original and creative idea was suggested and later implemented? Put up your hands. Yeah. Indeed. Brainstorming is a funny thing. It's been around for about 70 years now. It has become the de facto standard of creative thinking in organizations, but there is a little problem with brainstorming. It's not actually a good way of coming up with creative ideas. And this started really bothering me. It seemed to me ridiculous. In the field of creativity, we are using an outdated, disproven process to try and come up with ideas. And I felt that the field needed some fool to try and come up with something better than brainstorming as a creative idea generation methodology. And I thought, well, I'm just foolish enough to try and do that. So about 2010, I tried to come up with a better alternative to brainstorming. And so I looked at the research into why brainstorming doesn't work very well, into how the brain formulates ideas, how people collaborate on ideas, and so on. And in particular, I looked at how artists, scientists, composers, and other highly creative people collaborate on projects. And I've demonstrated that here in this illustration. So imagine, for example, a dance troupe is planning to do a performance on this stage in 3 months' time. They come together, and what they do would be nothing like brainstorming. They basically have a discussion, a debate, an argumentative approach where they try out ideas, they play with ideas, they reject ideas, they criticize ideas, with the aim of coming up with a big concept. So someone might come in and say, let's do Romeo and Juliet. And someone else will say, no, Romeo and Juliet, that's old news in dance. If we're doing Shakespeare, let's do King Lear. King Lear, you must be joking. King Lear is so depressing. Someone else might say, well, why don't we do a story about two lovers at the end of the world? Yeah, that sounds good, says someone else. And we could make a beautiful stage. And you see, rather than coming up with a long list of ideas, you work towards developing a big, huge creative concept. And the advantage to this is, at the end of the discussion, you actually have something to work with. The choreographer can go off and start working on the dances. The stage designer can start working on the stage designs. You don't have to wade through lots of ideas and try and find something. You're ready to go. So with all this sort of research of mine, I came up with what I call anti-conventional thinking. And as its name implies, it's about purposefully rejecting conventional thinking in favor of unconventional thinking when you want to be creative. In order to understand how anti-conventional thinking works, it helps to understand a little bit about how the mind works, how you remember things, you recall things, and how you have ideas. So what I'd like you to do is think of a conversation you've recently had with a friend. Okay, remember a conversation you've recently had with a friend. Who was this friend? What did you talk about? Where were you? How did the situation smell? And then imagine, as you're talking to a friend, a cat walks in, looks up at you and says, "Excuse me, have you seen a mouse run past?" Okay, so what's going on here, and what does that have to do with creativity? Well, it's about how the mind forms memories. It's not like your mind is a video camera like we have here that just records life and you can kind of rewind and replay bits as you wish. Instead, basically what happens is you go through life having this talk with your friend, listening to TEDx talks here, reading, thinking, whatever. Your mind forms memories. It remembers all this information, but what it does is it breaks it down into little tiny chunks of memory that I like to call notions. And it stores these notions in a very structured way. So notions about your friend might be over here, notions about a more special friend might be over here, notions about emotions are here, and so on. It's all kind of organized in a way that your mind can retrieve the information as it needs it. And when you remember something, some mechanism in your mind, and nobody actually quite understands how this mechanism works, but a mechanism in your mind quickly grabs notions from the various parts of your mind and strings them together to recreate the memory. Now, when I first asked you to remember this talk you had with a friend, you probably thought about the friend and the talk and little else. Then I asked you about the location, about how you felt, about the smell, and this forced this mechanism in your mind to run around and grab more notions and put them into this memory to make it a more comprehensive memory. So that's how your mind remembers stuff. Now, interestingly, it does basically the same thing when you're trying to be creative. The same mechanism in your mind runs around taking notions here and there and putting them together and seeing if the idea works. And if you take two or more notions from various parts of your mind and put them together and come up with something that's novel and new that you've never thought before, that's a creative idea. And the process of doing that is being creative. And as I say, the same mechanism in your mind as remembers stuff creates stuff too. But in addition, when you're trying to be creative, there's another part of your mind that becomes active. It corresponds to a part of the dorsolateral prefrontal region of your brain. And I like to call it the mental bureaucrat. The mental bureaucrat's a very stern, rules-oriented chap who looks at all the thoughts that go through your mind, and if stuff's inappropriate, the mental bureaucrat basically doesn't let it through. Now, overall, the mental bureaucrat is a good thing for you because it's what ensures that we conform to the rules of society, that we behave in moral, proper fashion, and so on. It's the mental bureaucrat. Like on a warm day like today, you might have been tempted to come here in a bikini because it would be nice and comfortable. But your mental bureaucrat would say, no, that's not a good idea. And so basically, society runs as it does because most of us have good functioning mental bureaucrats. However, it does tend to inhibit creativity. Because imagine you're at a meeting, group of people, a crazy idea comes to mind, and the problem with crazy ideas, as you probably know, is when you first have them, it's really hard to know, is this creative genius or is this sheer stupidity? And if you've really had a crazy idea, you probably know what I'm talking about. The mental bureaucrat, in most people, will say, it's crazy. Don't say it. Keep it to yourself. Don't share that idea. You're going to embarrass yourself. Now, what's really interesting is people who are naturally highly creative, their mental bureaucrats don't work very well. And this is why they work well enough to keep them out of trouble, but not as well as most people. And this is why creative people spew out crazy ideas all the time. And I believe it's also why they tend to be slightly eccentric in how they behave and how they dress and so on, because their bureaucrat isn't controlling them as well as with other people. So, if you want to have creative ideas, clearly what you need to do is to grab notions from diverse parts of your mind and put them together, because similar stuff is stored in the same place in your mind. You need to go to different parts of your mind, bring notions together to come up with crazy ideas, and you need to train this mental bureaucrat to reject conventional thinking in favor of unconventional thinking, hence anti-conventional thinking. And I put all this together in a little process that could be shared with companies and organizations and so on. I call it the ACT process. It's a 4-step process. Step 1, you have a situation in which you want to have creative ideas. Your instinctive reaction is very probably to jump out and have ideas, to think, to come up with ideas. But that's actually a bad mistake. It's a mistake that most people make, because when you look at a situation initially, you're only seeing the surface of the situation. You're essentially only giving your mind a very limited range of related notions from which to form creative ideas. Instead, you need to take the situation, bring it deep into your inner mind, play with it, move it around in your mind. When I do workshops with companies, I actually often have people meditate and bring the situation deep into the mind, and I ask them to walk around the situation, to play with it, to bring animals into it, change colors, and do all kinds of crazy things, because as we do this, it brings all kinds of weird associations with other situations, other notions in the brain, and gives a huge range of raw material that can be used for forming creative ideas. In addition to meditating, you can also ask questions. This is useful in a collaborative group. Second step, optional, if you're working with a group of people, it helps to have a common sexy goal to work towards. I say sexy goal because you want the goal to be interesting, provocative, exciting. Most brainstorms, as I showed you in the beginning, have very boring problem statements like, what new features can we add to our new digital camera? When you ask a question like that, you don't get diversity, you don't have unconventional thinking. People think cameras. So they think about lenses and resolutions and blah, blah, blah. Very boring camera ideas, not creative stuff. So you need to change, make the goals sexy. For example, instead of asking about improving the camera, why not ask, design a device that enables you to capture memories and share them? Because fundamentally, that's what a camera is all about. But by getting rid of the notion of a camera and looking at the core purpose of a camera and coming up with a sexy goal like that makes it a lot easier for the team to come up with crazier ideas. The next step is you have to be like that ballet troupe, that dance troupe I told you about before. Idea generation is not about coming up with a long list of ideas and choosing ideas. Rather, it's an argumentative debate, emotional-filled discussion to come up with a big, shared, creative vision. Now, unlike in brainstorming, where you're absolutely prohibited to criticize ideas, in anti-conventional thinking, not only are you allowed to criticize ideas, but you're actually encouraged to do so, because the only way you can truly understand an idea and its potential is by criticizing it, questioning it, asking about it. Now, the problem with creative visions is at the end of a session, you have a big, huge, grand creative vision, and particularly if you come to a workshop with someone like me, have a lot of fun, you have a big, grand creative vision, then you go back to your desk at work, and suddenly that can seem very, very intimidating. You wonder, why the hell was I having creative visions when I've got 10,000 emails to deal with today? So the last step in anti-conventional thinking is to take that big, huge creative vision, smash it down into a series of much smaller, much more manageable steps, and then see the vision as a goal at the end of a series of steps, and just take it one small step at a time until you get to your creative vision. That, in 12 minutes, was an extremely short introduction to anti-conventional thinking. If you want more information about the method, as well as links to the papers and so on that I used in terms of understanding brainstorming, etc., you can find them at that URL there. Thank you very much indeed.